Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Cowboys Report. And man, do we have an absolutely crazy situation to break down for you today that has literally taken over social media. I'm talking about some wild rumors circulating about the Dallas Cowboys potentially pulling off one of the most aggressive moves in franchise history during the 2026 NFL Draft. And you know what? Some of these reports are straight up not adding up, and I'm going to explain exactly why in just a second. But before we jump into all this drama and break down the actual facts versus the fiction, I got to say thank you to everybody who's already subscribed to this channel. We're sitting at 171 subscribers away from hitting 246,000 on the Cowboys Report. And that is absolutely insane to me. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you even doing? Hit that subscribe button right now. It takes literally 2 seconds, and you're going to get multiple videos every single day about your Dallas Cowboys, the NFL draft, free agency, games analysis, all of it. So do yourself a favor and join the family. All right, let's get into this absolute madness. So here's the deal. The rumors started swirling around that maybe, just maybe, the Cowboys are looking to make a huge splash and trade up from their current draft position at number 12 all the way up to number 3, which belongs to the Arizona Cardinals. And apparently, this would be to grab Texas Tech edge rusher David Bailey, who's having an absolutely incredible season and could be exactly what the Cowboys defense needs. Now, this conversation got kicked off by Todd McShay, who's a legitimate analyst over at ESPN, and then it kind of spiraled from there with Bruce Feldman from The Athletic throwing his hat in the ring with his own mock draft. But here's where things get really interesting and honestly kind of messy. A lot of people online started running with this idea and really twisting what was actually said into something completely different. I listened to Todd's podcast multiple times trying to figure out what he was actually trying to communicate, and let me tell you, it was kind of all over the place. He was bringing up the Cowboys as a potential trade-up team, but then he was also talking about Arizona possibly trading out that spot, and he was mentioning David Bailey, but there were also mentions of Jeremiah Love. It was genuinely hard to pin down exactly what Todd was trying to say, which honestly opened the door for a bunch of bad takes and misinformation online. Then you had guys on social media, and I'm not even going to name them because honestly they don't deserve the coverage, but they started saying stuff like the Cowboys could get to number 3 for just a third-round pick, or that there were direct discussions happening between Dallas and Arizona about this exact move. And Todd actually had to come back out and clarify what he meant because people were completely misrepresenting what he said. He basically confirmed that Arizona would like to move back from that spot, which is real, but he wasn't necessarily saying the Cowboys were the perfect trade partner or that the deal he mentioned was actually realistic. I think what Todd was actually trying to reference, and he kind of beat around the bush about it, was this mock draft that Bruce Feldman had put out there where he had the Cowboys jumping from 12 to 3. And people got attached to that idea because they saw that Bruce had sources, which is true, but those sources were about the actual players they liked, not necessarily about what teams were going to do in trades. Now, let me break this down for you because this is where the real analysis starts. If the Cowboys somehow pulled off a trade to go from pick 12 all the way to pick 3, that would be absolutely insane, and if it's possible, you do it in a heartbeat. The problem is it's basically impossible with the assets Dallas actually has available. When you look at what teams value these picks, it's not even close to being 1-to-1. Like if the Cowboys offered 12 and 92, their current second and third round picks, that doesn't even come close to getting you to number 3. You'd be getting absolutely fleeced, and the Cardinals would still be getting an amazing deal. But even that wouldn't be enough to convince them to make that trade down. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If we update the trade value chart with the more recent version from Draft Tech, and you combine the Cowboys' 2 first-round picks, which would be 12 and 20, you're getting closer. That would actually get you somewhere between pick 2 and pick 3 in terms of draft value. The issue is you're still a bit short. There's still roughly a mid-second round pick difference between pick 2 and pick 3 on the trade chart. So the Cowboys would need to add something else on top of those 2 first-rounders, and that's where it starts to get complicated because teams that are moving up in the draft typically have to overpay. That's just how it works. It's supply and demand, basic economics. If you're the team that wants to move up, you're the one who's got to be aggressive and sweeten the deal. There are exceptions to this rule, like years ago when the Raiders wanted to move out of a pick so badly that they took less than full value. But those are rare situations. In general, moving up costs you more than moving down, and that's why I'm honestly pretty skeptical that the Cowboys are going to be able to engineer a move all the way up to number 3. But here's what I think might actually happen, and this is way more realistic. What if instead of trying to jump all the way to 3, the Cowboys look at moving up just a few spots to something like pick 6 or pick 9? Now we're talking about something that's actually achievable and makes way more sense from a value perspective. The Cleveland Browns, they've got pick 6, and from what Andrew Berry, their general manager, has been saying, the Browns are are very much open to trading back from that spot. He basically came out and said they might not even be picking 6th overall because they could be moving back. And that's huge information for a team like Dallas that's actively looking to move up. Now, let me walk you through a trade scenario that actually makes sense. Let's say the Cowboys offer up pick 12 and pick 20 to the Browns for pick 6 and pick 39. Now you're getting some real assets back. You're getting good draft capital to replace what you're giving up, and you're only moving up about 6 spots, which is way more reasonable. The value isn't perfect, I'll admit that. It's actually slightly in favor of the Cowboys, which means they're not overpaying as much as you typically have to when you trade up. If the Browns are really committed to moving back at all costs, this could be a scenario where they're willing to take a deal that's not 100% in their favor because their priority is just getting back and getting more picks. But even that might not be quite right because Bill Barnwell over at ESPN put out a scenario that had the Cowboys giving up picks 6 and 24 plus a 2027 5th round pick to get 12 and 20 back plus a 2027 2nd round pick to the Browns. But here's the problem with that. The Cowboys don't have a ton of draft picks next year. They're actually kind of light on tradable draft capital, and they're not always super comfortable with borrowing from the future. It limits your flexibility down the road. But wait, there's another option that might actually be the most realistic of all. What if the Cowboys could swing a trade with the Kansas City Chiefs to move from pick 12 to pick 9? Now, that's a much smaller move. You're talking about just 3 spots, and the math works out way better. Something like picks 12 and 92 for pick 9 would be pretty darn clean from a value perspective. And here's why this matters. The big issue with trying to move up is if you wait too long, you might miss out on your guy because other teams will snipe him before you get a chance. Like Miami's got pick 11, the Bengals are at pick 10, and the Chiefs are at pick 9. If the Cowboys are really worried about missing out on some of these elite defensive players, then getting to pick 9 before the Chiefs have a chance to grab a defensive guy themselves makes a lot of sense. Now, let me talk about the actual player that started all this craziness in the first place. David Bailey from Texas Tech has been absolutely incredible this season. The guy put up 19 tackles for loss, 14 sacks, and 73 pressures. That's elite level production. Now, he did spend a lot of his college career focusing purely on pass rushing, which means his run defense isn't his strongest suit, and honestly, I don't think it ever will be. But when you look at what the Cowboys need on defense, specifically in a 3-4 scheme, David Bailey has got all the tools they're looking for. He's got great arm length, he's got speed, he's got bend in his hips, he can dip and rip past offensive linemen. He would be an absolute fantastic selection for the Cowboys defense, and from a pure talent evaluation standpoint, I'm completely on board with the fit. The problem is always going to be the price tag to move up and get him. So here's my real take on all of this. I don't think the Cowboys are going to be able to realistically trade up to pick 3. The math just doesn't work. The Cardinals are not going to accept a package that's short of full value, especially when they're trying to rebuild and need as much ammunition as possible. But could Dallas trade up to something like pick 6 or pick 9? Absolutely. And I think that might actually be the more likely scenario if they decide to be aggressive in the draft. Could they stay at 12 and still potentially land a guy like David Bailey if he slides a bit? Yeah, that's also possible. But the more you go down the board, the riskier it gets because other teams are going to be hunting for that same pass rush help. What makes this whole situation crazy is just how much misinformation got spread around. Todd McShay says something that's somewhat vague, and then the internet runs with it and creates this entire narrative that doesn't really match what was actually said. That's why it's so important to go back and listen to the original sources and really understand what these guys are actually trying to communicate, because at the end of the day, guys like Todd and Bruce are legitimate analysts with real sources, but they're not perfect, and sometimes their information gets twisted into something it was never meant to be. Looking at the bigger picture here, the Cowboys defense absolutely needs help. There's no question about that. Whether they get that help by trading up or by standing pat at 12 and waiting for someone to fall to them, that's the real question. My gut tells me they're probably going to explore trade-up options, maybe have some conversations with teams like the Browns or the Chiefs, but ultimately the price might be too steep to actually pull the trigger, or they might find a compromise and move up just a few spots to make sure they don't get beat to the punch on their target guy. Only time will tell, but what we know for sure is that the Cowboys front office is definitely looking at defense seriously in this draft, and they're not going to be afraid to be aggressive if the right opportunity presents itself. All right, so here's what I want to know from you guys. Drop a comment down below and let me know. Do you think the Cowboys should trade up in the first round? Would you be willing to sacrifice future draft capital to get a guy like David Bailey in the first round? Or do you think they should stick at 12 and maybe wait for a defensive player to fall to them? The comment section is always where the real discussion happens, so let me know what you're thinking. And hey, if you're not subscribed yet, seriously, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our Cowboys Report videos. We're putting out multiple videos every single day covering everything from draft analysis to game breakdowns to free agency updates. And if you're looking for some merch to rep the Cowboys Report, we got you covered. Head over to chatsports.com, Cowboys Report, and you can check out all our t-shirts, hoodies, and hats. The link's going to be in the description and the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.